most challenging part is to basically predict, what is going to happen in the next few months. I think the government is, making a lot of efforts to try and contain the numbers. I think there have been some near term
Right.
successes in terms of mobilization, but yeah, it is a challenging period, no doubt.
Rahul, what does it mean for inflation? I mean, all these new infections are disrupting supply chains. Add to that, we have escalating commodity prices.
Yeah, so unlike last year, I think the supply chains have not broken down in the same vein. There's been a very conscious effort on parts of both the union and the state governments to ensure that businesses continue to function as normally as possible, and to ensure that supply chains are also intact. So I think the inflationary impact is likely to be less compared to what we saw last year, but certainly there's a risk that you see a little bit of a pickup. I think RBI also yesterday in its bulletin flagged the risk of supply chains getting broken down and that leading to some near-term inflationary shocks.
You talk about how the outlook remains uncertain. I'm just wondering, what are the things you're looking out for to gauge how well the economy is doing in the coming months? What indicators are you looking at?
So we are paying a lot of close attention to the very high frequency data that we have been getting. I think electricity consumption, railway freight activity, mobility of coal, which is the primary fuel that we use for generating electricity. We are also paying a lot of attention to GST e-way bills data, which comes on a weekly basis. So, and all these indicators right now are not showing any significant economic hit. I mean, the numbers are getting weaker as the pandemic becomes more wider in terms of the geographical base. But then it is nowhere close to what was the situation last year in a full lockdown. It's almost about 5 to 7% of the economic hit we were seeing last year. So that's why we are still holding on to our economic forecast, because I think vaccinations are going to be the key to opening up the economy.
Rahul, I think that Hussain asked you about the possibility of inflation. You weren't that concerned, but I mean, food inflation could be a problem. I mean, look at the way that grain prices have been rising globally here, and India's not going to be immune to that.
Absolutely. I mean, India is not immune to the global food price shocks, but then the amount of food grains that the country has been having in its buffer stocks is quite high. India has had three straight consecutive good monsoons, and the production of food grains has been quite adequate. So I think in the near term, supply pressures are actually not that big. The real risk will be that the monsoon season is approaching. The mean reversion could catch up with us, and if we have a bad monsoon, then that could bring another wave of food inflationary pressures. But right now, it doesn't feel like that there's any imminent issues as far as the supply chains are concerned.
Rahul, very quickly, your forecasts here seem to be rather conservative. Do you think that the danger is that you're perhaps being too conservative and things could be worse? Very quickly.
I think so. I mean, in the near term, there are clear downside risks to our numbers. I mean, what we are watching very carefully is the supply estimates around vaccinations, because we are still at the beginning of the fiscal year. If we do see vaccinations pick up very aggressively in the next 3 4 months, I think we can still realize close to double-digit growths. It could be around 11%. What we are forecasting, it could be a bit lower. But then I think that is really the key. That the faster we vaccinate, the more sustainably the economy opens up.
Rahul Bajoria, Barclays Chief India Economist, thank you so much for being with us. A quick check of the latest business flash headlines. Apple is increasing its U.S. investments by 20% over the next 5 years, allocating $430 billion to develop next-generation silicon and spur 5G wireless innovation, after investments outpace its original 5-year goal of $350 billion. The iPhone maker says it will create 20,000 new jobs in the U.S. and fund a new campus in North Carolina. Apple said it's also the country's biggest taxpayer.
Right, several companies in the Greater China region reporting earnings later. We have Huijian Mutai, Jiangxi Copper, Chalco, and others due to release results. We also got the big one. We've also got HSBC, and indeed on that note, we're going to be talking with the HSBC Chief Finance Officer, Ewan Stevenson. After we break those numbers, going to be looking at all that in about, 35, 40 minutes of thereabouts, 32 minutes, if you will, right now. And of course, Bloomberg Terminal subscribers subscribers going to follow those results on T-Live Go. Just to tell you about markets as we head to the HSBC numbers, we also have, of course, that lunch break right here in Hong Kong. The Hang Seng going off for its hour break, looking indeed at stocks dipping after the US did see some records. Hang Seng not as badly off as others, 1/10 of 1% down heading into lunch. A lot more on the way, including Ian Stevenson, the HSBC Chief Finance Officer. This is Bloomberg, and Daybreak Middle East is next.
Daybreak Middle East, our top stories this morning. It's a bank earnings bonanza with results due from HSBC and UBS this hour. We speak to Ewan Stevenson on this show and hear from Ralph Hammers later. Another record for the S&P 500, but Tesla shares slip as it beats on profit but leaves the growth outlook unchanged. China expands its antitrust crackdown. It's now launching an investigation into suspected monopolistic practices by the food delivery giant Meituan. And Egypt says it hopes to soon end a $900 million compensation dispute over last month's blockage of the Suez Canal. What's just gone 8 a.m. across the Emirates? I'm Yusuf Gameluddin in Dubai. Let's get straight to it because the lines are hitting the ticker on the terminal. HSBC earnings are now officially out. The first quarter adjusted pre-tax comes in at $6.39 billion. The estimate was for $4.39 billion. So that is a comfortable beat on the first quarter adjusted pre-tax. The first quarter adjusted revenue line, $13.27 billion. The The estimate here, again, was slightly lower than that, 12.68 billion. So a beat on the revenue and a beat on the pre-tax for the first quarter. They're saying that the first quarter results favorably were impacted by net ECL releases. Going into this, of course, the expectation was that credit risk had receded, that capital return plans are well on track. But again, it's really the cost savings of about 5.5 billion that Bloomberg Intelligence argues must be shown to be